This weekend was interesting for a couple things. One, you had the Arab League. So the Arab League Summit is where all the Arab countries get together to discuss a cooperation on various issues. It was particularly notable for two reasons. One, Syria's Bashar al-Assad was allowed back in, with many of the Arab countries wanting to, but not all. So for example, Qatar did not want Syria back in, but a lot of the other Arab countries want to reintegrate Syria, who was kicked out in, I believe, 2011 due to the Syrian civil war for all the atrocities we called that. They're trying to bring Syria back in for various reasons. For one, regional stability is a big one. I believe 5 million refugees were displaced in our neighboring countries, which is a big deal. I mean, half the citizenry internally within Syria is displaced. Then also, Syria's turned itself into a narco state. They flooded the MENA with this amphetamine speed type drug called Captogen, where rumor has it they're making up to 3 times the annual revenues of all of the Mexican drug cartels combined, which flood the United States with drugs. So you can imagine just how significant that revenue stream is. And of course, all the MENA countries want to curb that. On top of that, Syria has allowed itself to be a staging ground for Iran to do whatever it will within the region, which they do have a lot of destabilizing activities. And this is due to the fact that Tehran has been propping up Damascus throughout this whole time. So Bashar al-Assad was at the Arab League, and also Zelenskyy. So Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, on his way to the G7 in Japan, he stopped in Jeddah to attend the Arab Summit to give a speech, which is an interesting development. So Ukraine has not really made too many efforts to target the global south. So the global south is pretty much the rest of the world that is not allied with the West, which is, I mean, the vast majority of the world. And like in the global north, many of its citizenry are very gung-ho in Ukraine. They understand, or they believe that is Russia's fault. Now, the global south does not necessarily believe this at all. The vast majority of the world is not necessarily convinced that the whole Russian invasion is not due to Western, particularly United States, meddling in the region. So Ukraine was going to the Arab League, who a lot of the Arab League countries, they have significant ties with Moscow, particularly due to oil, OPEC plus, what have you. So they went in to essentially give their case, which is a positive development for them, strategically speaking. After leaving Jeddah, they went to Zelenskyy went to the G7 meeting in Japan, where he was able to get an in-person meeting with Narendra Modi, who is the Prime Minister of India. Again, India has significant ties to Russia going back to the Soviet times. So during the Soviet Union, the United States was closely allied with Islamabad, so Pakistan, and India was tied with the USSR to the point that even, for example, Bollywood was the films were very popular in the USSR during the Soviet period, especially as like Hollywood films were not allowed. So there's a lot of cultural just ties and political economic ties historically that have been difficult to break. So Zelenskyy had a face-to-face meeting with Modi to state his case. Zelenskyy attempted to set up a meeting with Lula da Silva, the president of Brazil, who also has been parroting a lot of Moscow's talking points on the war. But rumor has it that da Silva essentially just refused a meeting. Now, after the fact, some of his PR personnel are coming out and saying, hey, he was available, it just didn't happen to work out. But word on the street is that he just blatantly refused, probably because he didn't want to upset Moscow, who funds Brazil, or they send to Brazil a lot of, for example, fertilizers for a lot of their economy. So it was interesting from those two perspectives. Zelenskyy dealing with the global south, which I'd say strategically is intelligent. He needs to do more of this to make his case on the global stage, because the world is made up more of just the West, and not everyone is aligned to the ideology that the Russian invasion is the fault of Moscow. And then secondly, it's notable due to Syria's Bashar al-Assad being readmitted to the Arab League. It'll be interesting to see if the Arab countries, who essentially want concessions regarding the Captogen, the drug trade, drugs being pumped out into the MENA, Syria, they want them to retake some of the refugees, and they also want to sort of curb Tehran's influence in Syria. It'd be interesting to see if that has any effect, which I have personal doubts.